Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Back in May of this year, the so-called first black governor of Maryland, the immigrant Wes Moore, decided he was going to show his white DNC paymasters that they got their money's worth with him. So when members of the Maryland State Assembly proposed a reparations study, not even a reparations task force or even a Freedmen's Bureau, but merely a study just to talk about it, Wes Moore, the tether, he immediately said, "Oh, no, we're not going to do that. I got to stop that." Well, in the last few days, the state assembly, led by the Black Legislative Caucus there, voted to override Moore's veto. And that made it where basically he's been shown as irrelevant to this process. Now, keep in mind, Democrats control both chambers of the Maryland Legislature, and they decided to get together to vote to override this guy. Now, keep in mind, this is merely a proposal for a study. But the potential reparations that are outlined in the bill include things like we've all heard before, apologies. There's talk of monetary compensation, but we got to see the details on that. Property tax rebates, social service assistance, licensing and permit fee waivers and reimbursement. And the reparations could also include assistance with making a down payment on a home. So there's the housing voucher scheme. That train's never late. Business incentives, childcare, debt forgiveness, and tuition payment waivers for higher education. So what that means is here's a sop to the HBCUs. Now, some of those things, like the monetary compensation, of course, property tax rebates, permit fee waivers and reimbursement, things that have to do with actual money, debt forgiveness like that, that stuff is very valuable. That could actually be a real starter. But other things like the whole business incentives, that's too vague for me to even know what the hell that's supposed to mean. And that's the entire point. They didn't make it vague because they didn't know what it was. They made it vague so that they could go ahead and shoehorn other people in there, and that's the problem. And for the folks who don't listen so well, the reason that I and others don't allow the powers that be to classify anything and everything as reparations is precisely because of the fact that we have been locked out of so many avenues of business, so many avenues of education. We alone have been singled out to be systematically and categorically barred from all of these avenues and venues and arenas that would make it where we would have the kind of upward mobility that we're supposed to have. So that being the case, when it comes time to talk about having a house, who are you going to be going to? A white bank? A white mortgage company? When it comes time to talk about waivers for higher education, who owns those universities? It's going to be white-owned universities in league with the state. And even the so-called HBCUs, be honest, these guys are white-adjacent institutions. Let's just be real about it. Cut the nonsense. So that's the problem that goes along whenever the usual, well, here's some talk about a down payment on a home. Not even a home itself, but a down payment on it. Because that just means it's a scheme to float government money to these white bankers, to these white mortgage companies, and the same thing goes for these so-called waivers for higher education. That's all that those voucher schemes are. That's the reason why the white right is so happy about them, because they know exactly what that is. Wes Moore was installed as governor specifically to derail black empowerment, just like these bootlicking Negroes you see in the white media. His job, just like theirs, is to prove to their white paymasters that they can keep our demands contained, that they can control us. If they can't, then white power has no need for them. That's why Wes Moore is worried right now. Sure, there's been plenty of proposals for reparations studies before, and yet these people are getting worried now. Why is that? Because this time, it feels different. Because this time, it wasn't a one-and-done pacification measure from their bootlicks in the immigrant black caucus. This time, the pressure is coming from the black grassroots itself, from people that they don't control and can't stop. And whatever they do, it's going to be followed up on. That's what they're really scared of. Once we get the ball rolling on that, it's not a matter of, well, a reparations study, we can stop here, right? No, it's not going to be allowed to stop there. We're going to keep pushing and agitating regardless, and that's what they're scared of. They understand the difference between when they get away with something, and on the other hand, when they got folks who are looking them in the eye and telling them, oh, we're not going to let it end here. It's different this time because the people who are owed reparations are the driving force behind this. We've had frauds like H.R. 40, and that didn't scare them. But as we force reparations into the political discourse, you notice we haven't heard anyone trying to use the old H.R. 40 dodge anymore. That was a deliberate nothing burger sitting out there for decades, and now you have yet another proposal for a reparations study, and this time the first tether governor of Maryland says he opposes it. This is the final proof that Democrats were never in favor of even doing so much as studying reparations, modest as that proposal is. So even the idea of a mere study is way too much for these bootlicks and their white paymasters now. That's because of pressure from the grassroots, pressure from you. They know that the issue isn't going to be allowed to stop at a study. The bootlicks and tethers have lost their ability to contain the issue and dispel the energy. We've been telling you this for the longest time, family, that the greatest opposition we would face would come from the very Democrats who these shills and plants tell us are on our side. And NBC, or Nothing But Caucasians as they should be called, they're saying that, well, reparations gained momentum after the murder of George Floyd. This is the white media trying to have it both ways. They can't deny that the issue has undeniably gained momentum, that they couldn't stop it, despite the white media's best efforts to try to ignore it out of existence in the hopes that it goes away. They tried to conjure magic by ignoring it, figuring, well, if we don't talk about it, then it'll just go away eventually, right? But it didn't. And then they tried to put on pathetic political theater like that phony reparations hearing before Congress a few years back. Hell, they even dragged out the scumbag Ta-Nehisi Coates for it. They tried to redefine what reparations is. That's what that congressional hearing was about. And they're still trying it now. NBC was the same outfit who had Joy Reid lying about us and saying that anyone who was talking about reparations in the 2020 election, they were a Russian bot. And here they are years later saying it was George Floyd's murder that brought this to the forefront. They know what the real source is. The white media is terrified of it. They should be. And speaking of scum who are terrified, now that the bastard's been overridden, Wes Moore's pathetically trying to talk as if, well, I was in favor of it the whole time, guys. I'm all about doing the work. After his veto was overridden, Moore said that while he disagrees with the legislature's decision, I am eager to move forward in partnership on the work of repair that we all agree is urgent and pressing need. I believe the time for action is now, and we must continue moving forward with the work of repair immediately. That mission is especially vital given the immediate and ongoing effects of this federal administration on our constituents, including communities that have been historically left behind. Now, you notice that he doesn't mention black people. He doesn't mention foundational black Americans, doesn't mention freedmen, doesn't mention descendants of slaves. Hell, he doesn't even mention clowns like ADOS. He's staying on script is what he's doing. Well, we're going to be talking about communities that have been left behind. Reparations is not about communities left behind. It's about a specific lineage. But here they are, still desperately trying to redefine it. Well, we need a catch-all term that will apply to everybody. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No. So, just like his fellow Jamaican immigrant Kamala Harris, Wes Moore is staying on script with what his white paymasters in the DNC have told him to say. And more importantly, he's making sure to avoid what they told him not to say. Dr. Claude Anderson pointed this out. There's been a 60-plus year-long war to make the word black anathema to political discourse. It's all about making sure that we're not part of the conversation. It's about erasing black from the political discussion, unless it has to do with black immigrants, and even then they just use them as a smokescreen to hide behind for their ulterior motives. All Wes Moore can do is just be a broken record, mindlessly repeating the same crap, the same words. Well, I'm all about doing the work, and I'm all about pressing need. We're the ones who say what the work is, and it's not empty gestures. When he vetoed that bill, he said that there was no need to study reparations because Maryland had some black politicians in office. He was talking about himself. He sounded like every white Republican you ever heard with that one, didn't he? Well, there's no need for reparations, buddy. You got some black guys in the NBA, buddy. There's some black guys in the NFL, buddy. There's your reparations, buddy. Well, there's welfare and food stamps, buddy. There's your reparations, buddy. Well, it's not some sawed-off redneck in the woods saying it this time. Now it's your so-called first black governor of Maryland. He's the one telling you that, well, you got a black governor. That's reparations, isn't it? That counts as reparations, doesn't it? And what's the so-called work that he keeps babbling about? He uses that word all the time like a child who discovered a new term. He said it was narrowing the wealth gap. The bastard didn't even have the decency to say black-white wealth gap. He says it as if reparations is about everyone. And it's about home ownership. There goes that word again. That means housing vouchers. And uplifting entrepreneurs of color, which means government contracts and government jobs for immigrants like himself. And then other gibberish like closing fundamental disparities, food insecurity, just the same pathetic boilerplate of rhetoric that the Democrats always serve up every election cycle. Well, that game's run out. Repeating the same old crap won't wash anymore because there's a new generation who understands their interest and isn't going to accept any of this word salad. We see through the lies. That's the reason why he never said that he was going to do anything for foundational black Americans. What was he going to do for the people making the demands? Nothing. And the scumbag has a nerve to brag that trash like himself being in office, well, the rest of us should see that as being good for us. That's how you know his lying words are meant for a white audience, specifically the white DNC leadership. This piece of dirt thinks he's going to be president. That's what he's thinking. Well, he can kiss that one goodbye. Democrats did everything they could to manufacture a Kamala Harris presidency, and she failed twice in a row. And she had the entire California political machine behind her. Wes Moore doesn't even have that much. But it just goes to show what he was banking on. His veto was overturned by a Democratic-controlled state legislature. That is humiliating as hell to him, because he's a Democrat governor, and what it shows is his own legislature decided to overturn him. That's huge when a state legislature does that. So he can't really count on them really for much of anything else. He's on thin ice is what this means. And the moron just got into office. That's why the bastard's sitting there trying to put a pretty face on him. So, I want you to know, I know I've been overridden, but I'm still in favor of it. I'm in favor of doing the time for action is now. I want you to know, yeah, you overturned me, but I don't mind because, I was down with the program the whole time. His entire hustle is to stop any action from being taken. He doesn't want action to be taken now or any other time. Wes Moore is trash. This guy is a tether who gives a bad name to everybody from Jamaica. He disgraces the on-code family from the Caribbean. He's a disgrace to the memory of Marcus Garvey, and he's a double agent for white supremacy. He depends on white power for every crumb of his daily bread. They were the ones who put him in office. They were the ones who bankrolled him. They were the ones who selected this moron and said, let's go ahead and put him into some sort of elected office. He knows he's not getting reparations. He's not owed anything. And given his degenerate behavior, he's owed less than nothing. He needs white power to feed him because he knows we never would. This creep is showing nothing but pure contempt for foundational black Americans, and that means that he is disrespectful towards all of the respect-worthy black world. And to think you actually have people in the Caribbean who are proud of this clown, just like they were proud of Kamala Harris, just like they've been proud of some of these other fakers, frauds, phonies, fools, bootlicks, and tethers that keep coming up here. If you want to know why Jamaica is in the pitiful shape that it's in, like the rest of the Caribbean islands, if you want to know why the Caribbean people have to live in poverty and their so-called leaders do nothing about it, if you want to know why the same colonial forces who dominated Jamaica's people still live off the fat of the land while the people live in shanties, if you want to know why Jamaica's government throws open the gates for non-black foreigners but deliberately ignores its own people, trash like Wes Moore are a prime example why. He's a living example of why the tethers are so dangerous. They hate black people. In their sick minds, they're going to escape blackness by showing nothing but total contempt for black people. And that's something that gets me. Why is it that you got all of these publications outside the United States, all of these folks from abroad who are just so happy for these clowns who haven't done anything for them? It would be different if these guys were bringing home the bacon for Jamaica, but they're not doing anything. They're not even distinguishing themselves. But the one thing that they do have that these folks back home, quote unquote, don't have is proximity to whiteness. And that's the real reason that they look at these guys and want to put them on a pedestal. This is why these tethers have no shame about being British subjects. That ought to be a source of endless humiliation, and if they had any pride or self-respect, it would be. They're proud to be subjects. Do you know that the word subject, that's where we get the term subjugated? So when you hear these tethers from the Caribbean or Africa talking about how they're proud subjects of their former white masters, they're literally telling you they're proud to be subjugated, proud to be enslaved, proud to be underneath. And these are the people who try to tell us that they're better than us, the Candace Owens and others, people who are proud to be subjugated in what's supposed to be their own country, no less. You're never going to get free with a mentality like that. And this is who white power selected. They cherry-picked them to be brought to the country for the last 3 generations. And these are the people who are their stalking horses and push the ideology that there's no real difference between us and a proud-to-be subjugated tether. And this is the result. Wes Moore doing white supremacy's dirty work. That's the reason why CARICOM's a joke, and it's never going to produce anything. People don't like it when we talk like this, but the reality is we're not going to their countries and trying to undermine them politically or economically. They, on the other hand, have a countless number of individuals who come here precisely to do that to us. And the way that we start the process of untethering ourselves from these operatives of white supremacy is through delineation. You start drawing lines and you defend them fiercely. See, what Wes Moore is doing, this is the kind of mealy-mouthed, two-faced, fork-tongued word salad that these bootlicks were put in place to say. This is their pathetic attempt to try to talk like us. I'm all about doing the work. Wes Moore is not doing any work at all except for white supremacy's dirty work. He's a tether and a bootlick trying to do his own impersonation of what he thinks we would say. And it falls flat because he spent his entire life kissing the rumps of white power. So everything that he says is meant to appeal to them. That's why he can't talk like us. What he says doesn't have the ring of truth to it. Family, do not forget or forgive these days of treachery. And don't forget or forgive the individuals who committed these crimes against us. Don't let anyone try to cover for them or make excuses for them. What tethers rely on is white power protecting them. But white power only does that so long as white power sees them as being tools that can still be used. When white power perceives that these guys are no longer useful, it discards them. And when that happens to them, then where do they go? Now you go ahead and put power in the hands of the people who these tethers were undermining and trying to derange our internal politics. You put power in our hands, and what you get is you get punishment for them after white power finally removes its hand of protection. That's how it goes in every other place whenever you have historically oppressed groups who finally gain their power. What they also do is they make sure that everybody who is complicit in their oppression is held to account. So you make sure you remember Wes Moore and these other scumbags, because while Wes Moore hasn't done anything, certainly not any work, those of us in the black grassroots recognize him for what he is: unfinished business. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Sakina Collins, Starlet Thompson, Nora Brown, Sherrard Brown, and Isaac. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.